It's unbelievable boat of this era. Because what do you think you're giving up in miles per hour to those guys?
So we were running, we were averaging 88, 89 miles an hour,
Hmm.
and we were running 94, would have been our high point there. So at one point in time when we came up behind Duff there, I wasn't coming up on him fast, but I started kind of picking out the boat in front of me. Like, wait a minute, that's Duff in front of me. No, that's pretty cool. So I went ahead and stepped it up just a little bit there and just kind of
Hmm.
ran with him back there for a little while and just kind of got a feel for where he was running RPM wise and
Hmm.
speed wise. And I wound up running with him for probably about 2 laps there.
Welcome to Power Boat Talk, the podcast where we talk everything performance boats with your host, Joe Road.
Well, welcome to Powerboat Talk. So today I have with me Mr. Eddie McPheeters, and Eddie is the owner of Eddie's Inboard, located in Tucson, Arizona. I've actually followed Eddie's on Instagram for a while, and he's a specialist in old Mandelas, and I love the boat we're going to talk about. Eddie's 72 Mandela. It's called Brown Sugar. It's just the coolest retro boat. But what Eddie just did a couple weeks ago was pretty fantastic. He actually won the Division 4, which is considered the GN division at the Parker Enduro. And so I thought it would be really cool to talk to him and kind of hear about how that all came about. You know, let Eddie tell us the history of the boat and how that whole project came to be. So thanks for joining us, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Yeah. So basically, when we got the bug to go enduro racing, I'll start a little bit before we went with the Brown Sugar. But my friend Tyler Stevenson and I went out to the 300 the first year that it was raced in Parker, and we decided that after watching that race, especially watching Ben Maroney run in his Plan B boat, he wound up winning that year. We decided, man, we got to do this, you know. So we came back to the shop, you know, and the momentum was on from there. And we had a full year to figure out what we were going to do, but we knew we were going to go racing next year. So we decided to take my long deck Mandela at the time, which was one of my dad's old boats that was built in 1968 and had a 427 Ford in it. And we went ahead and decided that, hey, we gotta do this. And I teamed up with my friend Tyler and we put in as many hours as was necessary. And we put a paint job on the boat. We wound up enduro prepping the boat. And then, of course, I was running an old 427 Ford. So I contacted Carson Brummett and asked him, what do I need to be doing to make this thing live, you know? And because they used to run those back in the old 9-hour enduro days. And he gave me everything I needed to look for, everything I needed to check, what needed to happen to win. And we did that. And we wound up running that boat in '06 at the Parker 300. And from there, we took first place in our division, and we did a third place overall finish.
Wow.
And we were on our way into first place when probably about 4 laps from the end, 3 laps from the end, I had developed an issue where I wound up getting possibly water. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but my engine started kind of falling over a little bit. We'd bring it down the trailer for a minute, check it out, couldn't quite figure it out. So we went ahead and did that to it. I'd get another lap out of it and it would start acting up again. Anyways, with the races wound up ending, and we wound up, of course, finishing first place in our division and third overall, which was great. And as I'm driving home from the race, I thought to myself, you know what, I better check my fuel separator out and see what's going on in the fuel. And sure enough, when I got home the next day, I found water in my fuel separator, and that's why it was acting so sporadically. But anyways, it was just one of those things that it was just amazing to do that race, and we just enjoyed it so much that the next year we decided to team up again, Tyler Stevenson and myself, and we put together 2 race boats. We did my long deck Mandela again, and then we did his long deck Hallett, and we restored that boat, put stringers, floors, all the everything needed to be done to bring that thing up to life, and ran 2 boats that next year, and we did very well that year again. And we did this probably till about '07, '08. '08 was our last race. and we started taking time off. And we did a race in 2010 with the black boat and the Hallet again, or the long deck Mandela and the Hallet. And finally, our final race was in 2012. And right about that time, life was getting pretty busy around my shop here. The shop grew a little bit, and we wound up taking a few years off. And during that time, my friend Tyler again came to me and said, I want to build 100% enduro boat. That's all I want. Single seat boat, straight to business. Let's make it happen.
Hmm.
So he wound up buying the old brown sugar boat, which is one that I had bought back in 2003 out of the Hot Boat magazine classified section. Back in 2003, when they had the paper copies of the Hot Boat magazine, the boat showed up in the back of the classifieds, and I got super excited about it. And I called the owner of the boat and said, "Hey, I'm interested in your boat, And he said, "Well, somebody's coming down from Northern Cal, and they'll be down here to pick it up this tonight or something like that, So you're too late." I'm like, "Well, okay." So I stewed on it for about a week or so, and then luckily I got a phone call back from the guy. He said, "You know what? That guy never came down to see the boat, so I still have it if you're interested." I said, "Oh, heck yeah, I am." So a bunch of my friends and I piled in the truck, and we drove out to, it was in Hollywood, California is where it was at, actually, up on the hill up there. And we picked the boat up, and I remember as soon as I hooked up to it, a friend of mine looked at it and he said, "Man, I can't believe you're buying this thing. This thing's horrible looking, I said, "No, it's not as bad as you think." And they're like, "This is the worst boat you ever bought." I'm like, "Well, no, we're good." So we brought it back to Tucson here, and I sold it to a friend of mine who was interested in it. And I kind of did a half restoration for him there to make it usable for him for a few years. He wound up using it as a lake boat and enjoying it for probably 5 or 6 years. Then my friend Tyler came along, and he bought it, and that's when we decided to make it a dedicated enduro boat. So we stripped it down to absolutely nothing, took every piece of fiberglass out of the inside of the boat, wound up refiberglassing the floors, the stringers, and then at that point it was necessary to build some fuel tanks in the boat. And carrying that kind of fuel with that amount of vibration and impact in the boat is usually pretty hard on aluminum tanks. So again, we had consulted Carson Brummett there, and he had said, you need to build some fiberglass gas tanks like they used to be done. So we did. We built wood and fiberglass gas tanks in the boat, and built one on each side in the front and one on each side in the back there. And the boat holds, with our auxiliary tank, it holds about 130 gallons of fuel.
Oh, wow.
And so it's enough, to run a 9-hour, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we have 2 mandatory pit stops we have to do, our idea was to carry as much fuel as we possibly can, and we'll figure the rest out later on. And that proved itself in this last race that we just did. This was the first year. We ran the boat last year for the first time. And when we ran the boat last year, we wound up finishing half the race and wound up burning a hole in a piston there due to a pre-ignition issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put the engine back together this year and did a really spectacular job internally there and built a heck of a motor. And this was the first year that we could actually use all that fuel and test it out. So I drove the first stint of the race here, did 30 laps, and which is 180 miles of the race. And I still had a little bit extra fuel in the boat still. So by the time I came in, and that gave us a really good standing in the field there. We were moving into, third place overall when I came in for the first pit stop. And and we were still first place in our division at that point. So we wound up about 6 laps prior to my pit. I started hearing a ticking noise behind me in the helmet there, and I knew the engine wasn't hurt. It was still running the RPM it was, still had plenty of power. And it turned out that we wound up having a hole in the header. I didn't realize it at the time, but kind of had a sneaking suspicion that something's going on with the headers, and kind of bugged me a little bit that possibly the header is blowing. There's a hole in the header and it's blowing on the gas tank. Ooh. But I had come around the backstretch there the first time I started hearing it, and I better pay attention to this, make sure I'm not getting myself in trouble here. And I had signaled to my pit that I was maybe going to need the trailer. And I came around for the second lap after I signaled them, and I didn't see the trailer on the ramp. So I figured, what? I must not be in that much trouble. So I'm just going to keep going. So I wound up going another 5 more laps after that, and burned all the rest of the fuel out of the boat, which is good. And when I got myself in pit lane there, I started idling back down on the motor, and it wound up sounded like a tractor at that point, So I'm like, well, something's definitely up. So as soon as we got it on the trailer, I got my helmet off. I was able to tell the guys, like, hey, man, go in the parking lot and grab the headers off the orange long deck Hallet that's in the parking lot. It's one of the boats we had brought to play with over the weekend. And so guys took off running up to the parking lot to get those headers. And by the time I got from the out ramp to the pit area and started backing in, I saw 2 guys running with headers underneath their arms, running into the pit already. And that was less than a minute, minute and a half. They had those headers off and in the boat. So I got myself out of the seat there and looked at it, and we're missing, sure enough, about a 5-inch section in the side of 2 primary tubes there. And sure enough, it was blowing directly on the gas tank, but luckily we had built some heat shields, and it was directly hitting those heat shields, and there was no collateral boat damage there. Those guys had the headers changed. Well, we had an 11-minute pit stop, so we had to be in the pits for 11 minutes, and we wound up being in the pits for 13 something. So that means it took an extra 3 minutes to put a set of headers on top of our normal pit. So I wound up getting, we got Tyler in the seat there, and he wound up running the rest of the stint after that there. And man, you got to tell you, hats off to my team, because, man, it's just an amazing team. We had a team of probably 20 some people there, and every person had a job, and everybody knew what they needed to do, and it just worked like clockwork, and it always does. We've always had super strong support from friends and my shop crew here at the shop that put the effort together in the pits and make it work, because every time we've gotten our pit well within the 11-minute time frame there.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, and kudos to whoever brought the parts boat, right?
Actually, Tyler Stevenson, that was the first boat that he ran years ago. And it's one of those things I told him. I said, when we left the shop, I said, you're taking your boat, that way we can play with it, enjoy it. And if we need a parts boat, it's in the parking lot. And sure enough, we needed it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said, I think you said the tank's 190 gallons of fuel it would carry?
130 gallons is what that would carry.
Okay.
Yep. And it turns out that that's enough fuel to do the race there. The injection system that we're running on it is a metered fuel injection, which is mechanical fuel injection they used to run on the old Mercury 700 packages back in the day for offshore racing. So it's Lucas fuel injection is what it is, and it's metered. And so our fuel economy wound up being close to 2 miles per gallon. It was about 1.8, something like that is what we were calculating. And by the time Tyler came back in for his second mandatory pit stop, the boat still had fuel in it, and the fuel team is yelling at him, hey, we need to put fuel in it. We need to put fuel in it. He said, no, there's plenty of fuel in it. I barely burned through 1 tank already. We still got 3 more to go. And we only had maybe another 45 minutes of the race left at that point. So we just decided to leave all the fuel in it and keep running. And sure enough, when we got back, I think we pumped out about 50 gallons of fuel out of it. Wow. So we had plenty to go the miles there. So to us, that's kind of our key there, is to be able to put some laps down in the beginning. And that way at the end, we're there to run and make up some time in the end there.
Yes. I mean, so basically your 2 mandatory stops were just, other than the header situation, they were basically driver change or
so the second stop was just not even a driver change. We left Tyler in the seat. We literally parked it in the pit, and we looked at the stopwatch and counted down, and talk about the longest 11 minutes of your life. Because I kept looking at my wife, who was counting off the time, and she'd yell out 3 minutes, I'm like, man, that seemed like that was like 10 minutes right there. And we got it down in the water and took off right at the 11-minute mark.
Yeah. And you knew at that point, obviously you knew you were in the running.
Oh, it was, yeah, definitely. After that second pit, it was, Tyler actually asked me when he got in the seat there, he's like, okay, I'm going to take it easy at first here. And I'm not going to run it too hard. And I don't want to break anything. I said, you're not going to break anything, man. We've gone 180 miles. The thing is running like a clock. So just let it go. Let it do what it wants to do.
Yeah. So what engine do you have in this one?
So this one here is, the interesting part about what we did here is because we wanted to build a dedicated enduro boat with the brown sugar boat there, we went ahead and again contacted Carson Brummett, who's just a great wealth of knowledge there as far as endurance engine applications goes, and said we want to build something that's period correct, super reliable, and fuel efficient and powerful. And he said, well, you need this Lucas fuel injection. So we went ahead and picked up the Lucas fuel injection from him. And then it came to the ignition. And what kind of ignition should we run? He said, well, the Mercury ignition they ran on these things was top notch. So we bought a few older setups there and brought them back to life. And we used the Mercury ignition. The engine itself is one of the old engines that we used to enduro race with in his long deck Hallett. And that was a 427 Chevrolet. And we went ahead and hooked it up with dry sump this time when we put it in brown sugar here. So we got a dry sump tank, and we're holding about 5 gallons of oil in the system. So that combined with our huge oil cooler that we have is definitely keeping the oil temps right about 225, and they don't budge. They just stay right there. So we can run it up a little harder. We can run it fully fueled with weight in the boat, and it doesn't affect it at all. Mm-hmm. The cylinder heads this year, we went ahead and stepped up the cylinder heads a little bit more and went with a set of Brodix heads. And we've decided to kind of stick with a solid flat tappet camshaft stuff, just so it's not so hard on the valve train. Roller definitely make more power, and everybody's doing roller, and nothing wrong with that. But we've had really good luck with the lighter spring pressures of the solid flat tappet stuff, and it still works within our power band there. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing that. I'd say that's probably about, this time, one really interesting part about the engine here. So we had pre-ignition issues last year, and we had plenty of fuel in the engine there, but it wasn't a factor of running lean on a cylinder that caused us to burn a hole. It was literally the piston getting super hot in one area, in a concentrated area, and it wound up kind of burning through and melting through the piston. We had one that burned through and two that started getting kind of deformed. Mm-hmm. And so we had an extreme amount of heat on the crown of the piston. So we went ahead and added sprayers this time in the bottom of the oiling system. So we have nozzles that spray up and spray the wrist pins and spray the bottom of the pistons there.
Oh, interesting.
So that was a lifesaver there to be able to keep that thing, a good confidence booster too, knowing that the bottom end is just rock solid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like this thing's just bulletproof. I mean, well, you're just so intentional about how you built it too. And
every detail was acknowledged there, and every clearance was checked and double checked, triple checked, and that we could build it with confidence from the very first part we put in when we laid the crankshaft in it. That every piece of this little motor is 100% right, and with that being said, it should go the distance.
The Lucas fuel injection, did you run that last year too, or is it just brand new this year?
Yeah, last year was our first experience with that. And Carson Brummett has had quite a bit of experience with that. And he shared with us all his knowledge over the years of running that. And because it was so new to us, we went ahead and built the first engine there, and we put it together and ran it on a run stand, broke it all in on a single dominator carburetor. And then from there, we went ahead and put the Lucas on the engine, and got it all set up 100% ready to go and loaded it in the truck. And we took it down to Carson Brummett's in Pasadena there. And he allowed us to run it on the dyno and showed us all the little tuning abilities, with that type of injection. As far as it's got a fuel cam in it, and it's very, I guess you call it rudimentary there, but the way the fuel cam works, very simple, and you can change the profile on that cam, and get your fuel curve dialed right in 100% to your engine.
Mm-hmm.
So we ground on the cams a little bit and got them right where we wanted them.
Mm.
And got the mixture set right where it needed to be for that altitude we were running at. And very interesting because the mixture is changed by putting shims in the actual metering unit. The 4,000 shim will make a pretty decent difference in the fuel. So we were able to learn about that. And as far as the fuel pressure goes, starting the engine goes, and so on. So it was super educational and an experience that we gladly took advantage of because we were brand new to it there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Carson's, everybody respects him, and he's got so much knowledge and so much success. His record's pretty unbelievable, but there had to be a little bit of like, wow, I'm going to put this like whatever 1970s, 1980s system on this boat. I mean, was there any?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I always had 100% confidence in what we were doing, but I can tell you the boat owner, Tyler, kept looking at me a couple times being like, can we just put a Dominator on this thing and make it work, and cause it's super simple, just put a carburetor on it and go. But, in the end, he's very intrigued by it and very, very excited to do it. So very supportive of running that. But definitely it's very complicated as far as the amount of fuel lines you have running all over that boat. And return systems and so on there. So we wound up actually making a book when we took the boat back apart again. That's like a map of all the fuel system, the oil system, and the water system, and we tagged all the water lines in it. And there's literally, I think, 40 some fuel lines in it. And we got up to number 40, and we labeled them all so that we could go back and put them back in and actually do it efficiently, and it worked out great when we put it together this year. We just went in the book, grabbed the fuel line we needed, and it fit like it was supposed to.
From a retro look standpoint too, I mean, this stuff just looks so cool, so period correct.
Oh, we couldn't. We definitely have to hit the retro part of it there. So there'd be no way I could do this with something other than an old retro boat like that. So it's just in my blood there.
Yeah. So the hull's a 72.
Yep, 1972. And that's a really interesting fact you brought that up because the original owner actually contacted me. So the original owner used to work for Carson Brummett back when he was in college. And that was his first job he ever had. And he figured he needed to have one of these boats. So he went ahead and bought that boat, the Brown Sugar boat, when he was working for Carson, and went and bought a trailer and started rigging the boat in the shop there. And it took him, he said, about a year and a half to be able to put together enough pieces to make the whole boat complete. And ironically enough, that boat's been out to Catalina Island. I think it's twice now.
Oh my gosh.
It's raced out to Catalina Island in the Catalina ski race there. And it actually placed very well the first year it ran. And I think it even placed the second year it ran too. So yeah, the gentleman's name is Steve Marshall that used to own that boat. And he found out that we were restoring the boat from Carson, and he actually called me when we were about halfway through the restoration process, and he said, I have a twin turbocharged Toyota that I will trade you straight across for right now for that boat. In the condition it's in, I don't care. I'd love to have my old boat back. And I said, well, I don't think you're going to be able to pry it out of Tyler's hands there, but we're definitely going to do a great job and represent it just like it was. And so he's been out to the race. He came out last year when we ran it for the first time, and hung out in our pit the whole time. And same time this year, he was there the whole time. And we told him, hey, you're going to have to drive this thing. Last year it broke, so we couldn't drive it. But this year it was still running. And unfortunately, the wind the next day was just crazy on the river there. So we weren't able to put the boat on the water. I think we had like 30-mile-an-hour winds. So kind of had to pass on that one there.
So has anything ever been done to the bottom? I mean, is this the original, the setup on the bottom is the original Mandela, the way?
Yeah. So I turned the boat upside down. I straightened everything out. There was a few things that need to be straightened out in it. And we did a mild blueprint to it. But for the most part, I flattened the rocker out just a little bit. it's pretty much the same boat it always was, but it's definitely been straightened out and tuned up just a little bit. And then, of course, we put a graphite finish on it there, on the riding surface there.
It just seems crazy to me that you've got Duff Daly, and he's got his Mike Stock call, which is the latest greatest, and then you've got the bunch of guys with racing, Mike Stock and Paul Fitzgerald, bunch of guys with racing crafts, which were tried and true endurance boats. And I mean, you weren't. Duff broke, but your lap count, I think Mike finished like 4 laps behind you or something like that. So it's unbelievable boat of this era, because you've got to be giving. what do you think you're giving up in miles per hour to those guys?
So we were running, we were averaging 88, 89 miles an hour, and we were running 94, would have been our high point there. So I actually was driving at one point in time when we came up behind Duff there, and I wasn't coming up on him fast, but I started kind of picking out the boat in front of me, like, wait a minute, that's Duff in front of me. No, that's pretty cool. So I went ahead and stepped it up just a little bit there and just kind of ran with him back there for a little while, and just kind of got a feel for where he was running RPM wise and speed wise. And I wound up running with him for probably about 2 laps there. And shortly thereafter, he wound up breaking on the eastern end of the track down there, which unfortunately for him was super far away from his pit there. So, but I drove around him a few times there as he was floating there waiting for help there.
Yeah, it's just amazing. You think about when they built that boat, we were talking about 50 years ago, like they got it so right that it's still competitive, and and in the rough water and in the turns. And
yeah, this one turns pretty darn good. So we went ahead and turned the engine around, turned it snout drive.
Okay.
So it definitely hooks the left hand turn real nice there. When it's fully fueled, it's definitely a bit of a barge there making the turn. So it's definitely, it tells you it's a little heavy, but it still actually performs very well in the turn. And, it's a bit of a semi V, so it handles really well in the rougher water. It eats the rougher water up for sure. And you just got to take it a little easy in the beginning of the race there when there's massive amounts of boats and rough water. So we definitely back down the speed a little bit and try to push through it and not try to fly the boat a whole lot there.
So, it sounds like it was kind of a pretty flawless run. Other than the header thing, was there any
this time? It really was. It was super cool just to be going around the track and just counting off laps. And just in the seat for a drive, there was nothing that caught my attention once that I was like, oh, we need to deal with that, or this might be an issue, other than the header failure. Man, it was cool just to be clicking off laps like that.
We can cut this out if it's too much of a sore subject, and maybe not. But I understand in the Division 4, there's the big pot that everybody puts into, and it was about a $30,000 pot. And I guess you didn't put into it though, huh?
No, we of course thought about it again, but we put so darn much money and effort into coming out there that we really didn't have a whole lot of extra to deal with. And the thought was there for sure, but honestly, we're just going out there to race, and we want to win the Enduro. We want to finish it under a checkered flag and do the absolute best we can. And it honestly is just not about the money for us there whatsoever. That'd be nice, definitely, but having the trophy and the checkered flag is about the coolest thing.
Yeah, I know, because what's the buy? Is it like $3,000 is the buy-in on it?
This year it was $3,000 buy-in there, and last year it was too, and it was a heck of a pot there for sure.
Yeah, but that's a lot of money, especially when you look at you're looking at the field, going, man, I've got a 50-year-old boat. I'm confident, but I don't know if I'm that confident.
Exactly.
Right?
No, I had full confidence there, but I definitely can tell you, when I've seen Duff run his boat, a lot harder. It definitely it scoots. So I could probably be pretty close there, but I definitely couldn't hang 100% where he was at in years prior when he was running the boat harder. But that's when you start breaking parts too, when you start running them that hard.
Sure. So what's the plans for next year?
Next year we're going to build a new set of headers, and we have all the tubing here. We just ran out of time this last year to build them, so we want to put the old set back on. And this year we're going to build the new set of stainless headers for it. And let's see here. We're just going to go through the engine real quick. It should be pretty good inside, and check everything for cracks and so on, and address anything that needs to be addressed. Gearbox, we're going to take the gearbox out again this year, and last year we didn't need to, but change the output shaft on the V drive. Just go through the bearings, make sure everything's good there. We are going to change the prop shaft. It's been an Enduro and a half now on the prop shaft, so it's time for a new one. We're going to go ahead and change the rudder out. And again, we got an Enduro and a half on that. Propeller is going to be a mandatory change out again, and steering cables. So we definitely cover the safety angle part of it there quite a bit. It's worth the money for sure. We don't want to get hurt doing any of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of V drive does it have in it? Casale?
This one here is a Casale V drive. And again, when we were building the boat, it was a really cool situation for me, because I get to talk to all these, wealth of knowledge people that have been in the business forever. And so Andy Casale, actually, I had a really good relationship with Andy Casale there as far as business and being able to talk to him about, what to do and how to do it. And so I went to him and said, hey, I got a Mandela here we're running, and we're going to load it up with fuel, weight it down pretty good. And I'd like to make sure we got a V drive that's going to go the mile, and he said, well, we're going to raise water jacket case. We're going to do double angle gears in it, the C500 shafts, that kind of stuff. So we built a pretty rock solid gearbox out of the thing with Andy there, probably about 4 years ago. So it's been pretty cool to be able to have his knowledge and input there.
Mm-hmm. So you own the Eddie's Marine Service.
Yep.
Now, how did you grow up boating, or how did that come about?
I grew up in the business here with my dad. It's kind of an interesting story there. We wound up, as I grew up, we had a plant nursery, and we owned a business called Catalina Heights Nursery. And my grandparents and my dad, my mom, they owned the business there. So I grew up doing that, but my dad always had Eddie's Inboard Marine on the side, and he'd go work after hours and weekends, building boats. And so as a baby there, I used to go over, I'd be with him all night long while he was working, building Mandelas back in the day. And I'd be in my crib, or later on, playing in the yard, and, eventually, drilling holes and stuff, and grew up doing that. So it's been a business I've been in ever since I was a kid. When I was about 15 years old, my dad bought a V-drive boat that needed some restoration work on it, and pretty much turned me loose on it without me even knowing it. He said, well, why don't you go ahead and mount the V-drive in it? Why don't you go ahead and make the engine mounts for it, and I'd go ahead and do it to the best of, his suggestions. And then we'd meet up in the evening there, and he'd be like, well, I think you could do that a little different. I think you do this or that, and he'd give me some more guidance, and I'd go redo it again. And sure enough, by the end of it, we built a boat, and it was pretty special there. I didn't know that, I didn't know I was going to wind up going that direction, but before you knew it, we were going that way. Mm-hmm. And one really cool thing was being able to, the next boat that he got was an old boat he had built back in the late 60s there. It was an old 427 Ford powered short deck Mandela. And since then I didn't have the 427 anymore, but the person he bought it from had started redoing the paint job. So the paint job was beautiful, and came to the rigging part. So I pretty much got free reign on picking up where he had left off, and using some of his old pieces he had made, and making some new pieces for this new engine that was in there. And we restored that boat and wound up selling it to the son of another one of my dad's customers from back in the 60s. So he ran that boat for quite a few years. So it's been really cool to be able to keep this whole thing going with the sons of of the fathers from back in the day. Mm-hmm, yeah. And I've done that probably 6 times now.
Oh,
for six separate clients. The kids have gotten interested in bringing dad's boat back to life again, or building a replica of it, and I've done that. There's one really cool one that I did that was kind of like, I guess you would call it a turning point for me there in evolution of, levels of boats you're building. And this one was Mandela, and this was for a customer. His name is Jeb Bennett, and it's a long deck a boat that he wanted built as a replica of his dad's old boat. His dad's name was Jake Bennett, and he used to race back in the old enduro days, in the 9-hour days, with Lou Brummett, with Stevie Stenton. And it was a very special boat because Stevie Stenton had built it for Jake Bennett, and they got to race it once or twice there. So Jeb bought this boat out of North Carolina and said, I want you to build this thing. So we wound up doing the same thing we did to Brown Sugar. We stripped it all down to nothing on the inside and fiberglassed it up, built the gas tanks, blueprinted the bottom. We did a metal flake Tangelo paint job color on it, and white deck, black stripes, just all standard Mandela style. We did the same number on the side of his boat there that was on his dad's. The boat was called Trick, and so this boat was called Trick 2. And the cool part about it was I was able to get to know Stevie Stenton. And Stevie Stenton, in my mind, is another old legend from back in the endurance racing days, and could build some really, really solid, nice hardware. And he built a linkage steering system in the original Trick boat, which used a Schroeder steering box out of a sprint car.
Sure. And
then ran bell cranks and tie rods back to the rudder assembly. And so we pretty much did that same thing in Jeb's boat for him. I had some friends that were able to help me calculate some of the distances between the bell crank center lines and so on, to make sure that we're not going to have any torque steer on the rudder. And it took about 5 years for me to get this boat done, but by the time I was done with it, it's 100% full enduro boat, and it hasn't been running the enduros yet, but it is 100% ready to run in the enduros there. And pretty cool piece.
Wow, the steering sounds really cool.
It is. It was fun to do, for sure. It was a challenge, and at first it was a little daunting for me, and definitely a little bit pricey because some of the rod ends alone that we were using were $200 rod ends. So just to make sure it's stainless steel, they're not going to break down. They're going to be 100%.
Yeah, interesting. So how did the Mandela thing come about? Is it just happened to be kind of the boats that your dad was into, or that was just the time, or?
That started back in probably 1964. And my dad had started going to the lakes up north of us here in Phoenix area there. And he had a little outboard powered Beesmeyer, a little 16-foot Beesmeyer that they skied with. And then all of a sudden, here's these cool guys hanging out on the point out there with some flat bottom Beesmeyers, like the 18-foot Beesmeyer, real rounded looking boat from back in the day. And those guys had some pretty good looking machines. So he figured he needed to have one of those. So he went ahead and ordered a Caribbean up in Phoenix there from Ellis. And he drove that around for a couple of years and then thought, I need to, what happened was he wound up going to a race in Long Beach Marine Stadium, and Lou Brummett was there with his Golden 500 boat with Butch Peterson doing some ski racing. And with that event, he wound up bringing out 2 boats that were on display in the back of a trailer. And my dad looked them over, and saw the quality and I got to talk to Lou and so on, and figured, I need to have one of these. So he wound up going down on a separate trip. He actually got on the Greyhound bus and went out to Pasadena and put in his order for his short deck Mandela in 1964. And then about 6 months later took delivery of it there. And he established a relationship with Nadine, who was Lou Brummett's wife at the time. And she was a salesman, and she kind of saw the writing on the wall that, you can sell some boats down there in Tucson. We need an Arizona representative. And so my dad wound up becoming the Tucson, Arizona representative for Mandella Boats. So he wound up becoming a dealer. And there was another friend of his up in Phoenix that was a dealer for the Phoenix area. And so my dad worked together with that dealer, and my dad would rig boats for him down here in Tucson, and then the gentleman in Phoenix would sell them there. So he wound up rigging probably 20 some Mandelas in the time frame, he was building them there. And he'd buy pretty much one boat a year, maybe two boats a year, and buy them as bare hulls with cavitation plates on them and struts and fins, and then go ahead and build the engine mounts and gear cases based on what the customer would want there. And so the Mandela thing ran pretty strong there. And as a kid, I grew up with Mandela shirts. That's all I had was old Mandela shirts. I still have some brand new in the bag too.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah.
Put those things on eBay.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're pretty cool. Oh, you know what? That reminds me. There was a whole nother little twist to that whole Mandela thing there. My dad actually got to pit for Lou Brummett down in a race down in Florida for the 9-hour down in Florida down there. Mm-hmm. He wound up sending a friend of his out to California to pick up the SK-38 boat, which was the boat that was going down with Rawhide back then. So they took two boats with them, and my dad's friend picked it up, brought it back to Tucson right about Christmas time in about 1966, I believe, 65, 66, and went ahead and brought the boat to Tucson, and Carson and Lou and Nadine, they showed up the next day right after Christmas, and they started their journey all the way down to Florida down there. And they raced down there for quite a while, a few days there, and that race they did very well with the Rawhide boat, and so yeah, it's kind of some interesting history that my dad was able to be a part of some of the racing history there too.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so interesting.
And still there today too. So my dad's still here.
Oh, is he? Oh, he's still with us. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another really cool twist to that too is the old Rawhide boat that he used to pit with there back in the day with Lou. We actually have at the shop here that we're doing some gas tanks on right now. We're bringing the old fiberglass gas tanks back to life for Carson. And my dad's been able to make and help with quite a few of the lamination processes that we've been doing, make a lot of the little pieces and parts that we've need individually made. So it's very cool. He's been able to be a part of it. He's been part of it back then, and he's a part of it now.
Mm-hmm. So Carson still owns that boat?
Yeah, Carson's the owner of Rawhide right now, and it's coming along very nicely there, and still got a ways to go, but it's 100% exactly the way it was.
Oh, very cool. Now, has he had that boat the whole time, or did it get away and he got it back at some point?
It got away.
Okay.
It got away for a lot of years. And another really interesting story, Tyler and I, when we were looking at building a dedicated enduro boat before Brown Sugar, he was looking on the internet and he found this boat. He found the Rawhide, and it had the number or had a different number on the side of it, and it had the name The Saint on it. And he sent that to me in an email, and I said, "That is the Rawhide." He's like, "No, it's not." I said, "It is the Rawhide. You need to go get that right now." And so he contacted the guy, and we started making arrangements to start driving out there. And by the time we got our ducks in a row to leave, the guy wouldn't answer our phone calls anymore. Oh. And finally he called back about 4 days later. He's like, some guy came by in the middle of the night and bought this thing, and picked it up, and it's gone. And sure enough, a friend of Carson's had picked it up for him. And
happy ending then.
Exactly. Wound up going back to California and got fully stripped down and assessed, and then the fiberglass restoration has been in process here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. That'd be cool. Can't wait to see that.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. It's a work of art.
Now, do you think he'll run it, or will it just be a kind of a showpiece?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Carson on that one for sure, but it's definitely going to be capable of doing it. Every piece and part is going to be 100% the way it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, and what motor did that have? It had the Ford in it?
That had an old 427 Ford high riser in it. And it's really interesting because that engine was actually reverse rotated back in the day. So instead of turning the engine around like you would snout drive, they actually turned the 427 Ford backwards, and that allowed the right-hand prop to be able to turn a left-hand corner really well. And it was pretty far ahead of its time to be able to do that. And it kind of caught some attention from what my dad was saying at the race course because, it was cornering better than most of them were, and why is that? And that's why.
Interesting. I forgot to ask you when you were talking about it before we got on to something else, but that's pretty amazing. When you first did the Enduro, you did it with the 427 Ford. I mean,
that was pretty special to
Yeah.
me. And at the time, you know, to me, it's not worth having this stuff just to look at.
Mhm.
And I had some very nice old Ford parts that my dad had from back in the day, and also stuff that I had acquired. So, you know, we put together a bulletproof motor that wasn't going to break, and it still hasn't to this day. So,
Wow.
it's still got a checkered flag finish on it right now from the last Enduro we ran in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And so I probably do need to go through and freshen it up a little bit now, but it's not hurting at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. So tell me, this might be quirky, but I think the old Elvis movie, right, Clam Bake,
Yep.
that was filmed in Miami. I mean, it's the hokiest movie, but I found a digital file of that and downloaded it, and I clipped out just the boat scenes, the true authentic boat scenes. There's some really good footage if you just look at that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really,
You're not the first person.
Yeah, I even went through and I was trying to identify some of the boats. So I'd love to hear stories about how they got connected, how it was. And I don't know, do you know anything about that, how that all went down, or anything about that whole
As
deal?
far as the way the movie went
the
down,
movie,
and so on?
how they got recruited.
So-
I mean, it's unbelievable that they came up with a movie, and they you know, because boat racing, I mean, I guess it was a lot bigger back then than it is now, but still it wasn't
Back
very
then, it was-
big.
Yeah, it still wasn't very big in the grand scheme, but back then it was so new, it was so different that to be able to run a boat that hard for that long, you know, and prove itself was something to be said. The really cool part about that whole thing is that was the actual race that my dad went to down in Florida with the Brummets there.
Oh, cool.
And so that actual footage is footage that he experienced there. And he can name off all those other boats that are in the videos there. The Fish Peddler was one of them. That's the red boat that was running with the big zoomies on it.
Mm-hmm.
And all the racing footage is 100% Lou driving in the Rawhide boat back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the movie scenes were shot in California with Elvis in the boat. They put a screen behind him, you know, and Lou would actually drive his boat down to the movie studio every day for filming and let them film with it and then come back and get it. And my dad had told me that he wasn't too keen on the idea of leaving the boat down there overnight. So he was more than willing to transport it back and forth, but it's not staying there. So, and of course, in some of the scenes, you know, he's got a 427 Ford up on the table working on it. And you can recognize the engine plates that are on it there. You know, they're handmade, you know, Brumlet pieces there. So
yeah,
if you know your history, you know what you're looking at there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there's when you say that now too, that's interesting because I think the California scenes, it had one engine or one induction, and then the Miami scenes had a different. So I'm surprised unless he told them like, hey, these are different, and they're like, we don't care.
Exactly. Yep. That's the problem is I don't think they cared in the movie there, but as long as they got Elvis in there, I think that was the main thing they were after. But the induction, you know, definitely that's where different generations, different races it ran, you know, and let's try this, let's try that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how much of your business now, I mean, is it do a lot of Mandela stuff? I mean, because I bet you're kind of like the go-to Mandela guy.
Yeah, it's kind of evolved into that. So pretty much most of the boats I restore now are Mandelas. I've got probably 4 in the works, 4 to 5 solid ones in the works right now that are ground up restorations. Mm-hmm. And we have a system to them that works, and I won't deviate from that. So we come through and make sure all the fiberglass work is 100% internally and what the customer wants. We'll usually finish them out unless requested. We'll bring them back to original wax solution flow coat on the inside of the boat. There's been 1 or 2 I've done with a glossy finish on the inside, which is beautiful, but very hard to maintain in a usable boat there. But they're all metal flake finishes there. The first couple boats that I did back when I started were automotive clear using metal flake, and they're absolutely beautiful looking boats. They pop like no other. One of them was called the Colt 45, which was a purple and blue metal flake boat. The deck was the same color as the boat with white stripes there. And it was a long deck Mandela. And that one, absolutely gorgeous looking. my dad's boat, I went ahead and reflaked that. That was the very first one that we had flaked, and brought it back to its original gold color there. The deck is still original from 1965. So the gel and the stripes on the deck are still original, but the sides, we had to redo those. So that one's a 427 Ford powered boat there. So what happened is we wound up evolving into gel coat, using clear gel coat with the flake just because of the durability factor of it. Mm-hmm. We wound up having to build the flake so thick to make it what it needed to be that it was very hard to get the hardware to mount up correctly with that much flake. So by using a gel coat, it's a hard surface, and we can get the depth that we need in the clear, and much more durable. So all the last 6 of them I've done have all been clear gel with a flake in them there. And we do all the factory brummet stripes on them like they would have come from Mandela. The standard wide stripe with the 2 outer pins there, and arrows on the side of the gunnel rails there. So,
did they always paint a metal flake, or is just every one you restore seems to be metal flake?
Pretty much all the early ones there were most all of them were all metal flake there. I think in the later years, people started doing more solid colors as the trend changed a little bit. But I've had nobody's requested a solid color yet, just because it's been it's just so awesome to look at the flake. You can sit there and stare at it for days.
Yeah. You've probably got gobs of old literature where you can look at the stuff and see.
Oh, I got endless piles of old speedboat magazines, hot boat magazines, and I've just studied them like every minute I've had as I grew up. I've been flipping through those things constantly, and I can't help myself when it comes to that kind of stuff. I got all the original Mandela brochures that they used to hand out. So all the different versions of the brochures over the years, I have those, quite a few of them still too. So we got a pretty good stack of them there.
Yeah. Kind of the majority of your business now, obviously with the restoration and you do a lot of gel coat work, or what else do you do, or what takes up your time?
Well, we do quite a bit of service and repair through my shop here.
Okay.
But we do like to do more custom marine stuff. So, if somebody needs some custom work done on a boat, exhaust or, drive modifications, or, any custom trailers, anything for that matter, anything custom will do. But my personal heart lies in the fiberglass and gel coat area there, and bringing the boats back to life. That's kind of my forte there.
Well, it's the nice thing about the way of the world now. I mean, there's not a lot of you guys out there, so I'm sure you're plenty busy. So it's kind of nice to be able to pick and choose and stay with what you really enjoy.
Yeah, I've enjoyed in the last few years here being able to pick and choose my projects a little more there, and I have some very good clients that are willing to put in the money, put in the effort to make it right, and that means the world to me, because they have to be handled a certain way, and there's just no corners that can be cut. If they do get cut, it affects the end result. So it's just not even worth it to me to even try if we're not going all the way the first time.
So do you ever think back to, it's that swinging doors thing, if you would have stayed in the plant business?
Every now and then, definitely. I definitely enjoyed that business quite a bit, but the boats have always been just kind of a calling to me, and I've never been able to get them out of my system there. So no matter how bad the job is, or whatever we're trying to do is challenging, every day is a different challenge for me, and I enjoy the heck out of it.
It has to be, I mean, because, as stuff ages, it's like fine wine, right? It just looks better. The lines, what we looked at 20 years ago and wouldn't give a second look to, now you look at it and it's like, oh my God, every inch of that thing is just cool, right?
We sit here and just stare at them and stare at them and stare at them, and it's kind of a sickness, I guess you'd say. I remember one boat that we did that was just amazing. It was a boat called Blue Steel, and one of my customers up in Idaho owns that boat right now. I built it for a friend of mine here in Tucson, and that one was like a blue steel color metal flake and a white deck on it and a blood red stripe. And when we first shot it, the first, as it started evolving, we got it all wet sanded out. We got the white wet sanded. We got the flake wet sanded. It was just gorgeous looking. And then we went ahead and masked off the stripe pattern for the blood red on it. And we shot that thing in the evening. And by the time we were done pulling the masking, it was good 9 o'clock at night by the time we were done. And we pulled that masking back, and 2 steps down the side of the boat, we're like, oh my God, we hit the nail on the head with this one. This one is just phenomenal looking. And it is. It's a cool looking boat.
Yeah.
That one's a 427 Ford powered short deck Mandela.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can't, that'd just be a fantastic feeling. So if you had the chance to sit down with Lou Brummett and talk, what are some of the things you'd like to know?
Oh man. I'd like to know what was going through his head when he was designing the boat. You know, I've had my hands on every square inch of them for a long time, and when I sand one down, it's just a natural feeling. I've done them so many times that it's just, you hold the sander the same way every time, and I would just love to know what was going through his mind when he was making the first plug for it to make the first mold. You know, what was going through his mind with the bottom design. A lot of interesting things I've seen on the Rawhide as I've been working on it there. You know, I've been like, wow, what's going on here? You know, they had moved the skeg back, and then obviously that wasn't the right move, so it went back forward again. And there was a filler plate in one of those pads there. And then the way the cavitation plate was cut on the back of that boat, it had a weird V shape kind of in the middle of the plate, and it's not something you see on any other Mandela there. So I'm kind of super curious to see what problems we were trying to solve where, and what he liked about the boat, what he didn't like about the boat. That would be really interesting to me. And I've kind of gotten some insight from Steve Stenton over the years there. He's always got a pretty good opinion on what's right and what's wrong there. When I call him on the phone and bring up different things, you know, it's really interesting getting his input there.
That's a really cool aspect I didn't even think about, though, that you got that boat, right? That boat he was so successful in, to really look at it like you're doing. That's really cool.
Every square inch of it there, and of course we're trying to make it better as we go, you know. And it was built as a race boat, so there's definitely a few little race boat things about it, but we're perfecting the game there on it, and it's going to wind up as a beautiful piece there.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Well, hey, I really appreciate you. I kind of just reached out to you out of the blue, and you know, I got you on really quick, and this is really interesting stuff. I really appreciate you talking to me about it.
I got 2 other things I didn't know where to throw in there to mention there, but we, over the last few years here, working with Brummett there, we've acquired the old Mandela molds. Wow. So we actually have the original hull mold that all these old Mandelas came out of, the 18-footer. And I have both the deck molds. I have the long deck and the short deck mold too, along with all the patterns for all the wood and all the transom bar and all that good stuff. Everything came with it there. So I haven't yet been able to pop a boat out of the mold yet, but definitely trying to bring back some of these old boats that are pretty beat up or are going to be twice as much time to be restored. I'm looking forward to being able to build a replica of that boat and bring it back to life. And then even changing the game a little bit and using some modern materials and so on in some of the newer layups there. So definitely I'm interested in doing the old plywood floors and Doug fir stringers and that kind of stuff. But we also would like to maybe step into doing a balsa wood floor boat and modern stringers there, and just see where that goes with it here in the future there. But that's still in the future there. What we did not too long ago here was in the same situation, we wound up acquiring the Brummett 21 mold too, which is the old ski racer. And I've recently worked with Conquest Boats here to help me mold the first one. Never doing anything of that scale before. Definitely was a very eye-opening experience being able to work with Conquest there and the guys in the lamination shop and Joe Coat and so on. Learn and teach me the ropes on what's in that process. And just recently, as of 2 days ago, we just popped out the first one out of the mold there. We lifted the top of the mold off and pulled it out. So it turned out very, very nice. I still have quite a bit more work to do on it, but it's been pretty awesome being able to walk past that the last couple of days and stare at it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's super, and I'm glad you said something about that. So, good, as far as the old stuff goes, so Brummett, or excuse me, so Carson, he just hung on to that stuff too. He had it, or somebody else have that stuff.
Yep, Carson had the original Mandela molds there for this entire time here up until probably 3 years ago. We picked him up 2 or 3 years ago, and the 21 was the next year after that. And he's always had that 21 mold in the back of the shop there. And I've always asked him about it as a kid. I've had all these different Mandelas over the years. I've had a 16 footer, 18 short deck, 18 long deck. I've had step deck cruisers. I have the 20 SS. I have all those, and I don't have a Brummett 21. And as I was growing up, I kept, asking him, hey, how do I get a Brummett 21? I need to get one of these, and he said, yeah, you're better off trying to find somebody that's going to sell you one versus me make you one. I said, well, I'm game, and it's just not going to happen. So, then, I got the phone call from Carson one day there, and I was just absolutely ecstatic, beside myself. And of course the answer was yes, I'll do something with him there. So, we cleaned out the mold right away there, and kind of got some game plans together on starting to mold that first boat there. And this first one is going to be my wife's and mine. It's kind of an example of what the shop does and so on, and kind of like a test piece there. But I'd sure like to be able to make some more in the future here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a nice looking boat, and I didn't think he made very many of those though, did he?
I think there was 32 of them.
Oh, that many.
32, okay. 34 made. The majority of them were inboard outboards.
Mm-hmm.
There was possibly 2 outboards. I know for sure one, but maybe another one there. And then the rest of them were all inboard outboards. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. The majority was inboard outboard. A V drive. There was 4 V drives made. Mm-hmm. And I know those all with like the back of my hand there. I studied all the pictures, and beautiful looking boats. Just extreme workmanship there.
Now, was that boat that was after Lou's time though, right? Or did he have a hand in building those? And that was all Carson.
Yep, that was Carson there. And the plug was made in the early 80s, and the first one came out of the mold in the early 80s there. And he had built 2 of them for Tom Pappas. And then there's another one called Flying Colors that's out there still. And I've been lucky enough to see, I think, just one so far in person. And that was a family in Lake Havasu there that let me come up and see their inboard outboard and take some measurements off of it, and look at the stripe package and so on, so I could replicate that on the newest boat here. So,
mm-hmm. And you're putting a V drive in yours?
Oh yeah, mine's definitely got to be a V drive. Yep, okay. Yep. And we're building it a little bit more modern. We're using all the old patterns and templates and so on that Carson had made, a lot of the drill jigs that he had. But we're also going to update the running gear a little bit as far as the material the strut's made out of, the skegs, cavitation plate thickness, that kind of stuff is all going to be up to date, with what some of the fast boats are running today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, Conquest guys are good guys. They do good work.
Super good guys. It's been, I had the best time, I'll tell you that. I got to take my travel trailer up there and live in the back of the shop. I'd go up there for quite a few days at a time, and I'd be in the molding room there with Paco and Carlos up in the rigging department. And it was a cool experience, and I hope I get to do more of it here in the future there.
And then as far as the old molds go, I mean, are you thinking about building like a new long deck, but building it modern? I mean, yeah, that'd be a great enduro boat.
That was that's something interesting you say there. That brings me to another cool point. I was able to bring the long deck mold back to Tucson, Arizona here from Carson's there because I had bought an old boat that Barry Chase had raced back in the day. It was called the Pusher, and he raced that in the old 9-hour enduros. That boat sat in front of Carson's for a lot of years. Number 9 out there is metal flake green. And finally, I got the opportunity to buy it. I bought it and brought it back to Tucson and stared at the deck for a while. And the deck was split linearly long ways. it had long splits in it, and it was actually starting to buckle on the outside edges for whatever reason.
Wow.
So I asked him, I said, this deck is pretty trashed. What do you think the possibilities are of me borrowing that long deck mold and making a new deck? And he said, well, I think we could probably work that out. So that was kind of a turning point there in some of the boats I was restoring, being able to borrow that mold. We went out there with an enclosed trailer and picked it up, brought it back to the shop. We went ahead and cleaned it, wet sanded it, polished it, and waxed it. We put 20 coats of wax on that thing. And then the cool part was being able to mold back in that mold. Nobody had molded anything out of it since probably the early 80s was the last time something came out of that mold. So it was pretty special to be able to put the first one back in there again. And I think we did that in 2005, 2006. And I still have that deck here. I haven't completed the boat yet. Now that I have the hull mold, I'd like to make a new hull too, because the boat had some freezing damage when it was up in Colorado. So eventually we'll get that deck on the boat, but it's sitting here ready to go. And bringing it back to the modern materials, that's kind of where I was going with that. The decks originally had a foam core underneath the bottom of the fiberglass there on the deck. And so this last one that we did, we used a balsa wood core on it. And so I'd like to continue using more of the balsa product there in the future there.
What an awesome relationship, though. Second generation guys. Between you and Carson, you kind of couldn't. There really wasn't anybody else the two of you could do this type of business with. And you just from your dads knew each other and made this work for all these years. That's really cool.
It was pretty special. I remember when I was younger, when my dad took me out to Carson's there. This was probably back in 2000. I think it was 99 or 2000. I was restoring one of my dad's old boats, and I built all the hardware in it. It was one of the first ones I'd done from the ground up. Everything was black anodized and, top notch, and super proud of it. So I took pictures of everything, so I took my little picture book over there and showed Carson, and, he liked what he saw and so on. But one of those things I've always strived to make things nicer every time, and a little bit better every time, and kind of one up what the last one was, so. That's kind of where the brown sugar went. It's one of those things that we built that was just above and over the top and above what we had done in the past. And it proved itself. So it's a one-of-a-kind machine that's ready to go win the Enduro again next year.
Yeah. Well, good job. It's something when a boat can perform in that environment and last there, but then to look like it looks on top of it, that's not very often you get that with a race boat,
Exactly. Yep. Usually they look like race boats there.
Yeah. So, well, very good. Thanks again for the info. And that's, it's really interesting. And,
you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. And people can find you. You're on, Instagram.
I think it's Eddie's Inboard Marine. Yeah. Just Eddie's Inboard Marine, I believe, on Instagram there.
And check it out, because you'll see you guys got a lot of pictures and a lot of stuff, video on the brown sugar, and a lot of video going around of the 9 hour too, watching the boat. It's amazing how, again, a 1972 boat just works so well. So
we'll keep doing it again.
It's fun to watch. So, all right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com.